Chapters 36 and 37 of A Fool There Was by Porter Emerson Brown. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 36. Again, the Battle. Schuyler staggered, stumbled to his feet, thin hands clutching for support at chair arm. "You struck me," he mumbled savagely. "You struck me. You'll fight me. Fight me." He lifted weakly, balancing himself upon unsteady, weakened legs. Blake, stepping back, found his hand against a glass of water. He seized it, advanced a step, and cast the contents of the glass full into Schuyler's contorted face. Schuyler slowly came to himself. The shock of the blows, of the words, and finally of the water against his head sent the blood to his brain, banished the liquor and the dementia from it. A weakened, miserable, pitiful imitation he was of the John Schuyler that had been. Yet it was John Schuyler that sat slumped into the chair, gazing up at the friend who had proven his friendship so often and so well. Schuyler sat for a moment, eyes blinking. At length his hand went forth slowly. "Hello, Tom," he said. "I'm glad to see you." Puzzled eyes went about the room, eyes expanding, contracting, like those of a man who, having been long asleep, awakens to find himself in a place unfamiliar. Blake went to him, leaning over him. "You can understand me now?" he asked tensely. Schuyler looked up. "Why, yes," he replied. "Of course, Tom. Of course I can understand you." Eyes again sought to solve the mystery of the room, for from the mind cleared had fled all memories of the mind uncleared. Blake cried, "You are coming away with us, Jack. Away from this hell snake of yours. You're coming today, now. Do you understand?" Schuyler nodded. "Yes," he said, "I understand." In his mind, the real and the unreal were clarifying into an accurate whole. He nodded again. "There's still a chance for you, Jack," Blake continued earnestly, all his force in his words. "There's still a chance for you. You're going to be strong and become a man again. Tell me that you will." "It's too late, Tom," he replied. There was in the words sadness, despair, hopelessness unutterable. "It's too late. Body, mind, soul are wasted, gone. There's no chance, Tom. It's too late." "No," cried Blake. "There is happiness for you, real happiness, the right happiness. Your wife, your child." "Don't speak of them," Schuyler moaned. "Don't. You must think of them, Jack. It's there that salvation lies. Think of the true woman, the wife who loves you. Think of the little one who used to put baby hands around your neck and try to tell you all the beautiful things that only children know. That is what will save you now, Jack, and only that. Think. "It's too late, Tom." "It's not too late." "You're sure? Quite sure?" "I'm sure, Jack." There was a pause. Schuyler rose. He thrust forth his hand. Blake took it, gripping it in his own. "I'll go, Tom, I'll go." Came to him a touch of that from which he had been able to withdraw so pitifully little. "We'll fool her yet, won't we?" he asked breathlessly. "We'll fool her, and young Parmalee, and Rogers, and Van Dam, and the rest of them. Let's go now, Tom. Take me away. For the love of God who has forsaken me, whom I have forsaken, take me away. Save me from her, from myself. My blood has turned to water, and my bones to chalk. My brain has withered. Good God, what has come over me? To think that I, who could once look in the eye all men, all women, all little children, should have come to this. Look at me, a fool in his drunken palace of folly. Dust, dirt, grime, filth all about me, in my home, in my soul. I thought it was too late, Tom. I thought from the beginning it was too late. The shame, the disgrace, the loss of honor, of everything, were new to me. I couldn't understand. Then I cursed myself. I swore to God that I wouldn't become the thing that I am. But He didn't help me, and I couldn't help myself. I tried. Ah, how I tried. But there was something. Her eyes, it was. Eyes that burnt and seared. I tried to kill myself, as Parmalee did. I couldn't, and the only forgetfulness lay in drink. Drink that sapped my strength and drained my veins and shriveled my brain. Tell me it's a dream, Tom. That it's all but a vile, horrible, gruesome dream. Tell me that I'm the kind of man you are, the kind of a man I once was. And don't hate me, Tom. Don't loathe and despise me. But pity me a little, just a little. He had sunk in a huddled heap to the floor, weak, hysterical, a half-crazed soul in the white-hot crucible of suffering. Blake leaned over him gently, and lifting him, helped him to the great chair. There was a great, unselfish gladness in his heart, but that gladness had changed swiftly to horror. He stood back, aghast, for there had entered the room Catherine and Muriel. The horror of it all did not show in the eye of the wife. She would not let it. The child, all gladness, ran to her father. She did not notice. "Daddy! Oh, Daddy!" she called. Schuyler, a huddled heap by the desk, straightened weakly. "You!" he cried brokenly. Tears welled to his eyes. He seized the little form in his arms, clutching it to him. Blake turned to Catherine. "You should not have come," he said. He was sorry for the hurt he knew she suffered. "My place is here." She went to Schuyler, stooping over him. "Jack, dear," she spoke very quietly. He lifted his eyes, dim, moist. His lips worked. "Oh, Daddy," exclaimed the child. "You've been ill. You look awful." He bent his head. "Yes, little sweetheart," he answered in shaking tone. "Very ill. God grant you may never know how ill." "But you're most well now, aren't you, Daddy?" she asked brightly. "I hope so," he replied. "Oh, how I hope so." Lips and voice both quivered now. "And we can play horsey?" she asked. "Yes," he assented. He essayed to lift her, but even the tiny weight of the little form was too much for his shattered strength. His head sunk upon the table, arm buried. His body shook. The child did not see, which was well. She was looking at her mother. "Mother, dear," she said reproachfully, "you forgot to kiss Daddy." "Did I? I'm sorry." Willingly, Catherine went to him. He raised thin white hand in protest. "Not now," he murmured brokenly. "It's not fair, not right." The situation was hard for all, no less hard for her than for him. No less hard for Blake than for either. He stepped forward, forcing a lightness of tone and of word that lay farthest from his thought. He laid his hand lightly on Schuyler's shoulder. "Come, Jack," he said crisply. "It's quite all right. There's no cause for anything but gladness. I'll see them to the hotel and come back for you." Schuyler clutched at his strong fingers. "Don't be long, Tom," he begged, whispering. "Only a moment," returned Blake, so low that only he might hear. Blake knew that he needed time to regain his self-command. He took Muriel by the hand. "Come, Kate," he suggested. Catherine shook her head. "Leave us for a moment," she urged. "Do you think it's best?" She bent her head. Taking the child, Blake left the room, and slowly Catherine again went to Schuyler's side. "John, dear," she said softly. His head fell again to his hands. "I can bear no more, Catherine," he whispered weakly. "Oh, God, how great is thy goodness! The shame of it all, the shame, the utter, utter shame. And you, Catherine, can forgive?" "I can forgive, John, dear. I do forgive. It was not your fault. It is the fault of the bird that he goes to his death when the eyes of the snake are upon him. It was not that you were weak, even. It was that she was strong. Strong in the one way in which she leads. I do forgive and understand." "You are good beyond all goodness," he murmured, voice low, vibrant. "No," she said. She smiled a smile that was no smile, and then, "It's been a dream, John, a bitter, bitter dream. But we are awake now, awake at last, and we'll never dream again, never." She rose. Violet eyes were moist. She turned away a little that he might not see. Her voice was lighter as she asked, "John, dear, don't you want me to stay and help you?" He shook his head. "Go, Catherine," he requested. "Go with Tom. It will be more merciful to both of us, and I want to be alone, to try to realize that the chance is mine to redeem myself. I want to ask God to try to forgive me and, in His infinite mercy, to help me atone for all the wrong I've done you." She bent her head. It was bitterly hard for her, as for him. She knew, as he said, it would be more merciful to them both that she should go. Gently she bent. Her lips touched his bowed head. Slowly she turned. Slowly she walked across the dirty, disordered room. She looked back once. He was still sitting there, head buried deep in hands. She was glad unselfishly. She could give him happiness. Would there ever be happiness for her? She was afraid, yet she was glad as Blake was glad. Still there was in her a great, great emptiness. Chapter 37. The Pity of It All. Left alone, John Schuyler sat for long, never-ending moments. He was weak unto the weakness of death. His soul was torn and tossed and twitched within him. At length he rose slowly to his feet. A dizziness, a nausea overmastered him. He reached for the bottle on the tabletop. As he did so, his foot touched some object upon the floor. He looked down. It was a bit of broken mirror. He stooped and picked it up. The light upon the table was on. He turned it so that it might illuminate with its merciless rays the last cruel line upon his face. Slowly holding the mirror so that eyes might see, he looked. He fell to his knees. This thing that he saw was he, John Schuyler? Came to him at length strength to rise. Came to his heart great resolve. He would make atonement to the woman whom he had forsaken, the woman who had not forsaken him. He would make atonement in as far as it lay within possibility, and to the child that was of him and of her he would make atonement. He was but a young man. Many years of life should lie before him, and of these years he would give all, and ask nothing. It was the sad wreck of a life that lay before him, a stinking, noisome wreck. Yet there must be something in it that was neither foul nor unsightly. That thing he would find. He set his jaw. Leaden eyes became bright. Then he was near to being a man. He had started toward the door, to leave forever the scene of his moral, mental, spiritual death. He was almost to the portal. Another step would carry him through, and beyond. She stood there. Red lips were parted in a little inscrutable smile. White shoulders shimmered. Lithe muscles rippled beneath her gown with every movement of her delicate body. She was beautiful, beautiful as an animal is beautiful, and her eyes were upon his. He staggered back, clutching at the door jamb for support. She laughed a little, lightly. Just in time. You're going away. Bien. I trust you may have a very pleasant journey. She swung into the room, lively, eyes upon him, vivid lips smiling. Rounded arms were clasped behind a lissome back. And if I hadn't gone, he inquired, you were about to go? She nodded. To another fool? She shook her head merrily. Oh no, she replied, red lips pursed. To a man this time. He shrunk a little. The madness was not far behind. Well, squeeze him dry, he muttered. Squeeze the honor and the manhood and the life and the soul out of him, won't you? And then Parmalee and Rogers and Van Dam will laugh at him from their hole in hell. And I'll laugh at all of you, for I'll be safe from you all. To squeeze him dry, won't you, you vampire? Again she laughed gaily. He was very amusing at times, this thing that had been a man. She slid to the desk, seating herself upon it, swinging small, perfectly shod feet with slender, silk-clad ankles. So, it's all over, she remarked musingly. Yet it was sweet while it lasted, wasn't it, my fool, sometimes? She tossed at him contemptuously a glowing crimson blossom, which she ripped from the great mass at her rounded breast. She went on. Those days on the Mediterranean under the blue skies, and Venice with the dim silence all about, and the soft night breezes whispering their strange secrets to us as we lay side by side under the rustling canopy. Very romantic for dreamers. And we did dream, didn't we, my fool? Or at least you did. She laughed again. Again she cast at him a crimson blossom, maliciously, tantalizingly. And Paris, that was good too, differently. The gay crowds on the Bois and the races at Longchamp, and the little place in the Rue Notre-Dame des Champs, and Saint Antoine in the Norman hills, and the fuss they made over the newly wedded couple, It was while we were there, if you will remember, fool, she went on, in voice caressing, but words that stung, on the morning that we first had breakfast under the grape arbor, with its young green leaves and nodding promises of luscious yield, that there came the letter from your wife. She laughed, long and merrily. He cried hoarsely, "Stop, damn you, stop! You've tortured me enough." Amédée served us that morning, she continued, unmindful. Or was it Francois? No, Amédée. He spilt the coffee upon the tablecloth twice, in his anxiety lest he embarrass us. And when you kissed me, with a little ripple of mirth, he looked the other way, covering his lips with his hand. Oh, admirable Amédée! The breeze was stirring that morning, fool, you remember? And the dead leaves of yesteryear fell about us, so. She plucked a great handful of crimson petals from her breast and cast them above her head. They fell about him and about her. And I dipped sugar in my coffee and fed it to you, and you let me read your wife's letter. Again she laughed. Through his clenched teeth came a muttered curse. It was interesting, drolly interesting, that letter, she continued. She couldn't understand why your mission detained you so long. Yet again she laughed, merrily, ringingly. Suddenly she shifted, lively, the poise of her body. Bah! I weary of this, and of you. But before I go, she leaned far forward, eyes on his, vivid lips curved, bare breast shimmering. A kiss, my fool. Why do you come here? He cried piteously. Have you not done enough? Is there no pity in your heart, no sympathy, no human feeling of any kind? I've heard you say so in other days, she smiled. Let me go, he begged. Haven't you done enough? There is no misery that I have not suffered, no degradation that I have not reached, no depths to which I have not sunk, no dishonor that I have not felt. Great God, what more do you want of me? He was a pitiful object, sunken, shriveled, abject. She looked on him with eyes that revealed only amusement and power. She asked lightly, What more could I want of you? What more have you to give, my fool? There's a chance for me, he pleaded hysterically. A little pitiful chance. Can't you find in that dead thing you call a heart just one shred of pity that I may have that chance that is held out to me? I don't ask much in return for all that I have given, just to be let alone. Ah, go, please, go. He was on his knees now, thin hands raised in beseeching. She looked down on him from where she sat, upon the desk, little feet swinging. She raised delicate arched brows. Anyone would think, she declared, that I had done wrong by you. He struggled erect. By God, I'll have my chance, he cried. I'll have it in spite of you. Do you hear? Go. In good time, my fool, she returned easily, when you shall have ceased to amuse me. You'll go now, he insisted frenziedly. Now. He stumbled forward to grasp the white rounded arms. She caught his wrists, holding him easily. You're not so strong as you were, you know, she said lightly. Suddenly she thrust him from her, reeling. Her eyes flashed, her lips curved in scorn. You sicken me. And then, you asked me if I had had all I wanted of you. I have, and more. And now I'll go and leave you to your chance. But not until... She had risen and gone to the great chair. Into it she sank. He was before her. She leaned forward, eyes heavily lidded, white arms extended, white teeth glowing, white shoulders shimmering. She hissed sibilantly, "A kiss, my fool." He turned from her, turned half back again. "No," he gasped weakly. "No." She hissed again, "Kiss me, my fool." The scarlet roses at her breast moved a little. Her lips were parted. Her eyes were on his. He cried thickly, agonizedly, "I'm free of you. Free, I tell you. I'm going back to wife, to child, to home, to honor. I'm free." Her lips curved. Her breast heaved. Her arms glowed. And her eyes were on his. He came a step nearer, another step, yet another. He was nearer now. She leaned back a little in the great chair. He was not a man now. He was a thing, and that thing was of her. Hands hung slack loose at his sides. Jaw drooped. Lips were pendulous. Only in his eyes was that light that she, and she alone, knew how to kindle. He was hers, soul and body and brain. Then suddenly came of the things that are unknown. Perhaps came to his ears a voice, to his heart an aid unknown. His hand stiffened a little, and then he leaped upon her. She saw. She had half risen. Back they went over the great chair, his body on hers, his fingers clutching at her rounded throat. For a moment they writhed. She screamed once. Then suddenly his twisted fingers relaxed. His head fell back. His body, inert, rolled from hers, turned again as it struck the chair, and fell, a thing crushed and dead, at her feet. She rose, breathing hoarsely from between red parted lips. There were marks upon her throat. Perhaps again she had overestimated her power, and yet it were not to be sure of this. Her skirt hem lay beneath his body. She stooped blithely, disengaging it. His fingers clutched torn petals of crimson roses. She looked. Then vivid lips parted, and she laughed a little. Of that which is known she knew but little. Of that which is unknown she knew much. Perhaps it is a small thing, after all, to wreck a life. When they came back, they found him there, alone. He lay prone on the rug before the great chair. The moonlight was upon his face, which was not well. Crimson petals, like drops of blood, were upon it, and the redness was crushed between his clutching fingers. Muriel did not see, for the friend such as few men may ever hope to have, and, having, may pray to keep, had thrust the child behind him. For a long, long time they stood there. Then, slowly, the woman that had been wife turned, her head sunk forward. She had suffered much, and yet there was in her still the power to suffer, but it was now the suffering of pity, of utter, utter pity. Head sunk forward, she reeled a little. The man standing beside her caught her in strong arm, that she might not fall. For a tiny moment she rested there, the only rest that she had known since it had come into her life. and who shall say that she was wrong, or he? Side by side they stood and gazed upon their dead. They held the little child that she might not see. Then slowly they turned and left, and in the end, perhaps, came to them of God the happiness that they deserved from him. Perhaps, even, it was a happiness refined of the suffering through which they had both passed. For to know great happiness, one must have known great sorrow. Upon the altar of things are made, ofttimes, strange sacrifices, sacrifices that we cannot understand, made in a way that we do not comprehend. For God has shown us, even the wisest of us, but little of the world in which we live. The End. End of A Fool There Was by Porter Emerson Brown. This recording has been by Roger Moline.